And good morning. How's everybody doing today? Fantastic. Looks like we have a good crowd in the audience today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Dr. Roddenberry coming to you, with food in my teeth, live from my home office in Willow Springs, North Carolina. I text woke you up. That's pretty funny, Maria. Well, that's what it's supposed to do. Fantastic. All right, so it's good to see everybody today. Coming to you live from Willow Springs. Today we're going to talk about the second half of the consciousness chapter, and we're going to be talking about sleeping and dreaming today. If I want to remind you, if you haven't already, please watch the TED Talk video, Your Brain Hallucinates Your Consciousness. If you like last night's webinar, when we talked about the different types of brain disorders and the different crazy ways that your brain creates consciousness, you will absolutely love the TED Talk that I have in your course resources folder. But today we're going to go ahead and be talking specifically about one type of consciousness, which is sleeping and dreaming. So let's go ahead and go to the PowerPoint. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the 24-hour cycle of sleeping and waking that we all have, called the circadian rhythm. We're going to talk a little bit about EEGs and how they measure how our brain changes as we cycle through sleep. We're going to talk a little bit about this very bizarre cycle in our sleep that occurs every night called REM sleep. And we're going to talk a little bit about REM disorders. If you are here, go ahead and check in with the chat bar. Let me know that you're here, kind of like Maria Valdez, who I woke up with my text this morning. Go ahead and type in and say hello. Good morning, Salem. Good to see you. Fantastic. Thanks for coming. All right. So the circadian rhythm is the 24-hour cycle of sleeping and waking that controls the biological processes of the human being. So it is controlled by this little structure in your hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. We're going to refer to that as the SCN. Now, if you remember, I was talking to you about tracts and connections in your brain. The retinohypothalamic tract actually connects your retina, your eyeball, to this little structure, and it allows this little structure to take input from your eyes to tell what time of day it is. So while your eyeball is looking at daylight in the middle of the day, the information is being carried back to the SCN, and it is keeping the SCN from becoming active. So the light that comes in through your eyeballs and hits your SCN hits your retina, travels to your SCN, and keeps your SCN from becoming active. However, as soon as the lights go down, the sun goes down, and your SCN stops receiving light information from your retina, it causes your SCN to get active, which then communicates with the pineal gland and makes the pineal gland become active, which produces melatonin, which then starts the sleep cycle for the night. You know, there are lots of things that are controlled in this 24-hour cycle of sleeping and waking. The hormone production, so cortisol is produced first thing in the morning, which is sort of your morning's cup of coffee, and it wakes your body up. Your body temperature fluctuates throughout the day. Did you know that your body temperature drops right before you go to sleep at night, and your body temperature begins to rise early in the morning, right before you wake up? Your bizarrely enough, your urination is also time dependent. Now, did you know the destruction of this suprachiasmatic nucleus leads to your inability to follow a circadian rhythm? It just completely goes away, and your body shows no 24-hour cycle of sleeping and waking. Those of you who have a new baby, who have a child, remember that the first 5 to 6 weeks of your baby's life were pretty unpredictable. Your baby slept probably 20 hours a day, but they slept at very bizarre times, and they didn't appear interested in necessarily sleeping at night when you were asleep. And this is because their little SCN hadn't myelinated and hadn't started working yet. So, destruction of the circadian rhythm, in a sense, sends you back to that same cycleless sleeping and waking pattern that you experienced with your newborn babies. So the pineal gland produces melatonin at night, which sort of kicks off the sleep cycle. And if you remember actually not last week, but on Tuesday, we talked about the pons. The pons is actually responsible for your level of arousal, and it also is responsible for relaxing your muscles during REM sleep. As we're going to talk about later, when you go into REM sleep, you start to dream, and scary monsters chase you. You might fight or be killed by somebody, and it's your pons that keeps your muscles flaccid so you don't thrash about and hurt anybody while you're having these scary dreams. I'd like to go ahead and welcome everybody to class. I see everybody's checking in. We have Andrew, Leah, Ankur, Jadija, Martine, Angela, Katy Perry, the crafty table. I'm not sure who the crafty table is, and Medina Neal. Medina, thank you very much for taking care of what we talked about today, and I will be sure to go into the grade book and fix your stuff up after class today. All right. So here's the deal. The electroencephalogram, the EEG. I got it written as EEO. Excuse me, that is a typo. The EEG is a tool that is often used to measure, to do research during sleep research. Crazily enough, this was invented by a Nazi scientist way back in the 30s who was looking for the soul, and he thought he could measure that with this EEG machine. And it actually turns out he did not measure that, but he was the first to understand that the brain generates electrical activity at night. Now, the first type of electrical activity that he identified, he named alpha waves. And these were kind of the electrical activity that people generate when they're not really focusing on anything. If you're just sitting back, kind of relaxing, drowsing out, your brain is going to generate alpha waves. And he thought that that was the only electrical activity that people's brains created. But then he accidentally had measured people's brain activity while they were thinking and focusing on a task, and he realized that the brain's electrical activity actually changed. And he named the second type of electrical activity, he named this the beta waves. And these are the electrical activity that your brain creates when you are focused and thinking about a task. If you look over here at the EEG recordings that I've got, what you're going to see is that your beta waves are a little bit smaller in their amplitude than are the alpha waves. Your alpha waves are a little bit higher in amplitude. They show a little bit larger wavelength, and they represent relaxing and no intellectual functioning, not intellectual functioning, no thought and focus. And so we've got these beta waves and these alpha waves that your brain is generating all day long. As you're sitting here focusing on my lecture and thinking about, wow, what an interesting thing Dr. Roddenberry's saying, your brain is generating beta waves. You are really focused. However, if you start to get bored halfway through this lecture, or if you're sitting in history class, not really paying attention, kind of laying back, just daydreaming, your brain is going to generate these beta waves. Now, these two scientists, Nathaniel Kleitman and William Dement, way back in the 50s, thought it would be cool to measure people's brain activity as they went to sleep at night. And they realized that your brain doesn't just generate alpha waves and beta waves. They actually saw all kinds of changes in the electrical activity generated by people's brains as they cycle through the sleep and wake as they cycle through the different parts of sleep during the night. So, if you've ever laid on the couch watching the TV and at night and you kind of sort of are drowsing in and out of sleep, you know that weird state when you're kind of awake, but you're really kind of sleeping, right? You can still sort of hear the TV, but you're really kind of asleep too. Your brain is generating these things called theta waves. If you look over here at the picture, you'll see in row C, stage one of sleep, we call theta waves, you'll see that the brain activity is changing even a little bit more. This electrical activity is starting to slow down. You're starting to get these taller waves, which with larger wavelengths, that is, from trough to trough or from peak to peak. And so your brain activity is starting to slow down. And you might even say yourself, I'm asleep. And you know what? This is not really true sleep. This is what we would call drowsy half sleep, if you will. All right. But if you lay there on the couch just for a few more minutes watching TV or half drowsing in and out of sleep, you're going to find that you actually do drop into real sleep. We call this stage two sleep. And you're going to be able to know that you're in stage sleep because you're going to get these little bursts of activity called sleep spindles and K complexes. Sleep spindles are actually seen by scientists as the first indicator of true sleep. This is when you are truly asleep. Now, you're in light sleep and you can easily be woken up, but you are really zoned out and sleeping at this point. Now, if nobody wakes you up on the couch and they give you 15 to 20 minutes, your brain's going to start, activity is going to change again. And you're going to start generating these big, crazy, slow waves called delta waves. You'll see them down there in row E. And we say that now when your brain starts producing delta waves, we say you are in slow wave or delta sleep. Now, if you look at the row E over there, it says stage 3 and stage 4. We differentiate between stage 3 and stage 4 by the amount of delta waves that your brain is producing. If 50% or less of your brain activity is delta waves, you are in stage 3. If more than 50% of your brain activity is delta waves, then we say you are in stage 4. But both of these types of sleep represent deep sleep when you are really, really hard to wake up. If you've ever been woken up by a phone or by one of your friends at 2 or 3 in the morning and you wake up and you're kind of confused about where you are and it's hard for you to focus and you're kind of trying to shake those cobwebs out of your head and it takes you a minute to figure out what's going on, you've probably been woken up out of slow wave sleep. And so here's the crazy thing. As you fall asleep at night, you're going to be awake. Your brain's going to generate beta waves. And then you kind of lay down on your pillow and relax a little bit. Your brain starts generating alpha waves. Okay. And then as you start to drift off towards sleep, you're going to start seeing these theta waves, which is sort of that period in between sleep and being awake. And even 5 or 10 more minutes goes on, your brain's going to start generating sleep spindles and K complexes. You're really going to be asleep. Then another 10 or 15 minutes, your brain is going to start I take that back, maybe 20, 25 minutes. Your brain is going to start generating these delta waves. And as you go to sleep at night, your brain is electrical activity in your brain is going to start slowing down, getting really, really, really slow. And your brain, in a sense, is going to look like it's slowing down and going to sleep. Now, we're not going to talk about it just yet. I'm actually going to talk about it in a minute. But if you look down here at the bottom, you'll notice that we have this thing called REM sleep. REM sleep is a special part of your sleep cycle that you go through probably 5 to 6 times a night. And the crazy thing is, your brain activity is going to change, and it is actually going to look like you are completely awake, However, you are going to be completely asleep and dreaming. So this is sort of the different types of electrical activity that Kleitman and Dement were able to measure when they were using the EEG. And they actually won a Nobel Prize for discovering that our brain is actually more awake when as awake as we are in the middle of the day when we are dreaming. Some people think that the brain some people would try to tell you that the brain goes to sleep at night when you go to sleep. It absolutely does not. And actually, during the REM sleep stage part of sleep, your brain is actually as active as it is while you're sitting in my class listening to my psychology lecture. How crazy is that, right? Now, here's the important thing about sleep. As we go through, so we have this 24-hour cycle of sleeping and waking. The crazy thing is, we get on to another cycle when we actually go to sleep at night. So our brain is going to cycle back and forth between these different types of, uh, of sleep as we go through the night. So if you look at this chart right below me, you'll notice that the person is consciously awake. Over here, it's actually, if you look along the x-axis, you see the number of hours of sleep. Let's say this person right here went to sleep and slept for 8 hours. Along the x-axis, you see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So at 4, this person has been asleep for 4 hours. Okay, and if you look on the y-axis, you'll see the type of electrical activity that is characteristic during that part of sleep. And you'll notice this person is consciously awake, and then they lay down on their bed and they start to go to sleep. You'll notice they start at stage 1, that drowsy sleep that's not really true sleep. And then after a couple of minutes, their brain's going to start generating those K complexes and sleep cycles. Now, this is actually considered true sleep. Stage 2 and slow wave are considered true sleep. Stage 1 is just kind of drowsy, half awake. And what you're going to do is you're going to go into light sleep, then you're going to go into slow wave sleep. Then after a 15 or 20 minutes, maybe even an hour of delta sleep, your brain's going to start becoming a little more active, and it's going to slip back into stage 2 sleep. And then your brain activity is going to look like it's actually fully awake, but you go into REM sleep when we dream. And then you'll notice after we dream for a few minutes, then the brain activity is going to change, and we're going to see those beta waves and those K complexes and sleep spindles, and we're going to go back into light sleep. Then we're going to go into deep sleep. Then we're going to come into stage 2, and then we're going to dream again. And what I want you to notice is that we cycle back and forth between these different stages of sleep 5 or 6 times during the night. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, a little bit about the different sleep cycles that we have during the night. You spend 50% of your sleep cycle in light sleep. We spend almost half of the night in light sleep. Now, how is light sleep different from delta sleep? If I were to come and shake you during light sleep, you would quickly wake up and you would be focused and ready to talk to me. So light sleep, your brain activity could be you could be really focused. If I were to come shake you up during sleep or during sleep, you would be very confused. It would take you a few minutes to wake up and figure out where you were. So light sleep is true sleep, but you can really come out of that and focus quickly. In slow wave sleep, you are completely active. In REM sleep, even though your brain looks like it's awake, am I lagging? That's a good question, Gustavo. Looking at my readout, it looks like I am not lagging, but is anybody else seeing a lag here? Interesting. I'll go ahead and let y'all talk in the chat bar. It was breaking up a bit. That's interesting. I'm looking at my readout right here, and it's saying I have back to normal now. Okay, that's interesting. My readout here is not giving me any indication of poor signal, so I'm not sure what's going on. I apologize. Oh my goodness, REM sleep, not alpha waves, but beta waves. Man, I have several typos in my PowerPoint today. I'm going to go back and fix those after class. Your REM sleep, you're actually generating beta waves, beta waves, beta waves. That's a typo. Okay, now here's the deal. Um, During your 50s, my age, as you start moving into your 50s, what's going to happen? Actually, go back. Let's talk a little bit about your deep sleep. Now, if you look at this chart, what I want you to notice is that we spend most of our deep sleep time in the early part of our sleep cycle. So if you go to bed at midnight at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and 3 a.m., that's when you're going to spend a lot of time in delta sleep. But as we cycle back and forth in the third or fourth cycle, we're not going to dip down into delta sleep for too long. And on maybe our fourth and fifth and sixth cycle, we may not even go back into delta sleep. So we get most of our delta sleep during the first part of our sleep cycle. Okay, and so if you go to sleep at midnight, what you're going to find out is that noises that happen at 2 and 3 a.m. in the morning aren't going to wake you up because you're in delta sleep. But as you get closer to 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., things that didn't wake you up before may get through your consciousness and wake you up. All right, so we get most of our delta sleep early in the sleep period. And here's another thing for me, another thing you need to know. As we get older, so starting at my age, in your 50s, what's going to happen is as you go to sleep tonight, you're going to spend less and less time in deep sleep or delta sleep. So when I go to sleep at night, if you were to measure me with an EEG, what you're going to find is that I do not spend a lot of time in delta sleep. Now, if any of you have ever been over to your grandparents' house or seen older people, what you're going to find is that older people have trouble sleeping at night, and they're going to report sleep disturbances and more problems. I don't know if your grandparents complain about that at all, but the crazy thing is our brain starts to develop an inability to get into delta sleep as we move later on into our life. Okay? Now, REM sleep. REM sleep is when our brain is awake, as awake as it is during the day when we are focusing and solving problems. And if you look at the chart here, what you're going to also notice is that we spend more time at the end of our sleep cycle doing our REM dreaming than we do at the beginning of the sleep cycle. So you'll notice the first cycle, it takes a long time to get into REM sleep. And this person takes almost 2 hours to get into REM sleep the first time. It takes them almost 2 hours to get into REM sleep the second time. But you'll notice it takes them only an hour to get into REM sleep the third time, an hour to get into REM sleep the fourth time, and an hour to get into REM sleep the fifth time. So what happens is we get most of our delta sleep at the beginning of our sleep cycle, and we get most of our REM sleep at the end of our sleep cycle. And we're going to cycle back and forth between REM sleep and non-REM sleep probably 5 or 6 times a night. Now let's talk a little bit more about REM sleep. If you'll notice, the heading of this slide is called paradoxical sleep. Why do we call it paradoxical sleep? Well, because your brain is as awake as it would be during the day, and yet you are completely asleep. And what's going to happen is different parts of your brain are actually going to become active. Now, when you're awake during the day and you're generating beta waves, this frontal part of your lobe is the most active. And that's the part of our brain that helps us think logically, helps us make logical decisions, helps us focus. And so, what you're going to see during REM sleep is that your frontal lobe, although your brain is just as awake as it normally would be, your frontal lobe is going to be less active. And so your logic and your planning and your impulse control is going to be sort of lowered. And I don't know if any of you have ever had those crazy dreams while you're sleeping at night. We have crazy, irrational dreams. Maybe we're flying, or maybe you're being chased by a monster that doesn't really exist. Well, this is because your frontal lobe, the logical part of your brain, isn't working as much during REM sleep. However, different parts of your brain are actually working. Your amygdala, we talked about that in chapter 2. That is the part of your brain that registers basic fears, things that scare you and things that excite you sexually. And so your amygdala is going to be more active. How many of you have scary dreams or sad dreams at night? Do you ever have dreams that make you unhappy? You ever woken up in sort of a because of a scary dream, right? I remember when I was a kid, I used to have a dream about these monsters that would chase me. These were monsters that were in a 70s kids show called Land of the Lost, and there were these monsters called slee stacks, and they kind of had these crab hands and these weird looking monster faces, and they would chase these people in this television show Land of the Lost. Well, when I was asleep at night, these slee stacks would always come and chase me and scare the absolute hell out of me in my dreams. And that's because my amygdala was generating these fear responses that my brain was interpreting as scary things. Now, your pons is also going to be more active. If you remember, what happens when you go to sleep at night and you're dreaming, your pons actually paralyzes your body so that you can't thrash about. So even when these slee stacks were chasing me and I wanted to run in my dreams, my pons prevented me from doing that. When I hit the ground, I woke up right away. Exactly, Lewis. It scared you so much that it actually shook you out of your dream, right? Have any of you ever woken up in the middle of the night and experienced what we call sleep paralysis? You wake up, but you actually can't move for a second. I don't know if you've ever had that experience of sleep paralysis, but what probably happened was you woke up during a REM dream and it took just a second or two for your pons to become less active and quit paralyzing your body. So you woke up in the middle of a REM dream and your body was paralyzed, and it took just a second for you to gain control over your motor functions, right? Now, your motor cortex is going to become active. This is the part of your body that moves you around. And so you're going to do all kinds of crazy things in your dream. You're going to run, you're going to kick, you're going to fight, and your motor cortex is active. But as I say, the crafty table, your motor cortex is going to want to move your body, but the pons is going to prevent it. Even though your motor cortex is sending nerve signals to your body to get up and run, your pons is going to say, nope, you can't do that, right? And then most of us have, if you have dreams, most of your dreams in REM sleep are going to be very visual and very vivid. You're going to see lots of crazy things. You're going to see lots of crazy things in your dreams, and it's because your visual cortex is very active. So here's the thing. Your visual cortex is active, your amygdala is active, and your motor cortex is active. So during REM sleep, you're going to see scary images that are very vivid, and you're going to run around and try to escape and battle and fight these things. But you're not going to be able to do it because your pons and these images are going to be crazy and absolutely unbelievable because your frontal lobe is not active, and you're not going to thrash and kick around because your pons is keeping you from doing that. And so what you're going to do is you're going to have these dreams that you just don't believe. Now, we dream these crazy dreams. So REM sleep is incredibly important for some reason. Actually, the neat thing is when we go to sleep at night, this is kind of cool, especially during REM sleep. What happens is the spaces we have this cerebrospinal fluid that floats around the outside of our body, of our brain, and kind of keeps our brain cushioned. And we have these blood vessels that travel through our brain. What happens at night? These blood vessels and the cells around them, ependymal cells, kind of shrink. And what they do is they create little holes or rivers in our brain. And at night, this cerebrospinal fluid that's stuck outside of our brain actually is able to wash through the middle of our brain, and it cleans out all of these proteins and all of the garbage that's floating around in our brain during the day. So as your brain's thinking during the day and creating action potentials and releasing these chemicals, all of this sort of garbage begins to build up in the synaptic spaces of our brains. When we go to sleep at night, like I said, the spaces around these blood vessels shrink, creating holes in our brain or rivers in our brain. And this cerebral spinal fluid is able to wash through and clean our brain out. And that's why you wake up so refreshed and bright eyed and bushy tailed in the morning. Now, REM sleep is so important that your brain cannot live without it. Now, if you stay up all night and don't go to sleep, if you stay up all night and don't go to sleep, you'll be kind of tired during the next day. When you go to sleep at night, you will not sleep more. So it's not like you have to make up all of your sleep. However, your brain insists on making up its REM sleep. So your brain wants about 1.5 to 2 hours of REM sleep a night. If you don't go to sleep for 2 nights in a row and stay up, when you go to sleep that third night, you'll still only sleep 8 to 10 hours, but your brain will double or triple the REM sleep in order to get the amount of REM sleep that you need. Quite possibly, quite possibly. Sleepwalking and sleep talking are actually, actually, I'm not sure, Ankur. That's a good question, because a lot of these behaviors that we see in children, like sleepwalking and sleep talking, actually don't happen during REM sleep. That's a great question. I wish I could say yes or no, Ankur. I will do some research and see if I can answer that question, okay? Great question. So our brain needs REM sleep. Here's the thing. If you go without sleep long enough, let's say you were to stay up 4 or 5 days in a row without going to sleep, when you fall asleep, your brain wouldn't even bother going through stage 2, stage 3, or stage 4 sleep. You would actually fall immediately and directly into REM sleep. For some reason, our brain has to have REM sleep every night. And if you prevent somebody from going to sleep for several nights, they're not going to sleep 27 hours when they go to sleep, but they will spend the majority of their time in REM sleep. This need for the brain to get its REM sleep is known as REM rebound. If you're prevented from getting REM sleep, your brain will increase the amount of REM sleep the following night to make it up. Now, here's the crazy thing. They've actually done experiments where they put the electrodes on the person's brain and they let them go to sleep. And what they do is when the person starts to go into REM sleep, they wake them up. Okay? And then the person goes back to sleep, and then they wait until they're going into REM sleep, and then they wake them up again. And what they'll do is they'll let a person get 8 hours of sleep, but none of it's REM sleep. And what they find is that when people wake up after 8 hours of non-REM sleep, they're still groggy. Their brain is still sort of, their thinking is not straight. And these people, when they do go back to sleep, will experience REM rebound. So sleep is important, but REM sleep is more important. And I'm sorry, my nose is itching for some reason. Okay, now here's the thing: we do most of our sleeping during dreaming. Research has shown that 80% of our dreaming occurs during REM sleep. That means that 20% of our dreaming doesn't occur during REM sleep, but the dreams that occur during non REM sleep tend to be less visual, less vivid, and less terrifying. Okay, so the mushy, happy, non visual dreams happen during non REM sleep. But when you go to sleep at night and you experience a REM dream, what you're going to notice is it's going to be very visual, very vivid, and often very emotional, scary, and sad. Okay? And so you'll see that written right up here. Now, why do we dream? Nobody exactly knows why we dream. Nobody has any idea why human beings dream, but everybody dreams. Now, if you're out there and you say, Chris, I never dream, chances are you don't wake up during a REM dream. All right. We talked about this brain structure in chapter 2, and we're going to talk about it again in our memory chapter. But there's this structure called your hippocampus, and that's what allows you to remember things. So anything you learn has to go through your hippocampus. Well, when you're dreaming at night, your hippocampus isn't active. Different parts of your brain are active, but your hippocampus isn't. And that's why it's so hard to remember your dreams when you wake up. How many of you have ever had this experience where you have this crazy dream and you wake up out of bed and you say, you know what, I'm going to tell my friend so and so about my dream. And you get up and you might run into the other room, or you try to call them, or later in the day when you run into them, you find that you can't remember that crazy dream that scared you so bad. And the thing is, it's because dreams are not processed through the hippocampus. So all the memories and the sensations that you experience in a dream completely go away and are not encoded in the long term memory. And that's why we typically forget our dreams. But why do we dream? Who knows? Sigmund Freud, the early psychoanalyst, thought that what we did during the night was we lived out our subconscious desires. So Sigmund Freud had this crazy theory where human beings were driven by these desires that were embarrassing, immoral, and sometimes illegal. He said, you folks spend your day repressing all of these desires that you shouldn't have. The desire to punch somebody, the desire to have sex with somebody, the desire to do things that are wrong. But he said, these desires, we have to hold these desires down at night. However, when we go to sleep at night, our conscience relaxes and we live out all our dreams and desires. So, for example, I may have a crush on my brother's wife, and I may have sexual thoughts about my sister in law. But you know what? If I acted on those desires, if I told my brother about those desires, I would get in trouble. He might beat me up. My sister in law would never talk to me, and my parents would be very mad at me. But when I go to sleep at night, I can live out all these dreams and desires in the privacy of my own brain, and nobody knows about it. That's what Freud thought. I don't know if that's true, but that's an interesting theory of why human beings dream. However, other people think that dreams are actually just another way of solving problems. So, your temporal lobe, your motor cortex, and your visual cortex are all parts of your brain that are focusing and active when you're trying to solve problems in the day. However, what these people argue is that when we go to sleep at night, our brain may still work on problems or be coming up with ideas and sort of using a non logical kind of problem solving when we're asleep at night. Now, these people point out lots of examples of people who come up with really cool ideas while they're asleep. It turns out that Albert Einstein's theory of relativity was discovered in a dream. Albert Einstein had a dream of a train coming into a train station, and that gave him the idea for the theory of relativity. Robert Louis Stevenson is said to have dreamed up the idea for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a very famous novel from the 19th century, while he was dreaming. And my personal favorite, Keith Richards, the guitarist from the Rolling Stones, thought up Satisfaction, the guitar riff for Satisfaction, while he was sleeping. He wrote in his book, My Life, that he was asleep one night and he woke up in the middle of the night, picked up his guitar, turned on his tape recorder, and played the intro riff to Satisfaction. He said he went back to sleep and woke up in the morning not realizing that he had ever been awake. He saw that his tape recorder had been on all night. He rewound it and listened to the beginning of the tape recorder and realized that he had written the introduction to Satisfaction, they're one of their most famous rock and roll songs, during a dream. So some people think that dreaming allows us to solve problems. On the other hand, some people think that dreams are neurological garbage, and I have to admit I'm one of these people. What they say is that when you're sleeping at night, these nerve connections, these neurons that have stored memories during the day, are sort of becoming active. Maybe, if you will, getting rid of these memories that you don't need anymore, and that your brain tries to put these random pieces of information together into a story. And that's why our dreams are kind of ridiculous, if you will. Let me give you an example. Let's say I had a Snickers bar for lunch today. I'm a student at Wake Tech and I had a Snickers bar. And so I've got the memory of eating a Snickers bar during the middle of the day. All right. And then one of my friends comes by later, a couple of hours, and says, "Hey, Chris, we're all going whitewater rafting this weekend. Do you want to go whitewater rafting?" And I say, "Wow, that sounds like a great idea. I think I would." So now I've got the memory of a Snickers bar and a memory of somebody wanting to go whitewater rafting. They're completely separate. They don't have anything to do with one another. And then my mom calls me later that evening. And as moms usually do, she's going to nag and tell me that I'm not studying hard and I need to work harder at class. So I've got this theory, I've got this memory of my mom nagging me. And so I go to sleep at night, and during REM sleep, all these memories become active. The memory of a Snickers bar, the memory of whitewater rafting, and the memory of my mom nagging me about not studying. So I'm having all these memories being activated at the same time together, and my brain puts them together to try and create a story. So I have this crazy dream of whitewater rafting down this crazy river on a Snickers bar, and my mom is on the Snickers bar with me saying, "You're not rafting right. You're going to wreck. We're going to drown," right? And so that represents kind of an idea of the activation synthesis model. Maybe we have all of these random memories that are being purged in the middle of the night, and our brain, as they become activated, tries to put them together and creates a crazy, bizarro story. And if you've ever noticed, your dreams sometimes relate to things that have happened to you, but they're also quite crazy too. Now, how does sleep change across the lifespan? Infants sleep anywhere from 16 to 20 hours a day, and they spend 50% of their time in REM sleep. And there are people who suggest that REM sleep is really important for the growth of these synaptic connections that allow our brain to knit itself together and create our adult abilities. REM sleep is important for memory and for learning. We found this out because if you prevent people from getting REM sleep during the night, you will find that their memory for things that they learned before sleep are not nearly as good as for people who actually get REM sleep. Now, as we move into childhood and adolescence, our amount of sleep needed goes from anywhere from like 12 hours as a 4, 5, and 6 year old down to the adult kind of need for sleep, which is around 8 hours of sleep at night. So we start out as infants sleeping anywhere from 16 to 20 hours a day. Your little 2 and 3 year olds are going to sleep 9 hours at night, but they're going to get that nap during the day for a total of about 12 hours. And as you move into middle childhood and adolescence, you're going to move into your normal sleep need, which represents about 8 hours a night. And your REM sleep is going to go from 50% of your time down to 25% of your time. So most of you are going to sleep about 8 hours a night, and you're going to dream about or have REM sleep about 2 hours of night. Okay. You may not remember dreaming, but you do go through REM sleep every night. I promise, I promise, I promise. And chances are you dream during those periods. It's just you wake up during non REM sleep, so you probably don't remember your dreams. Now, adults sleep as adults, probably all of you sleep somewhere between 6 and 8 hours a day. Your ratio of REM sleep is going to be 25% of your total sleep. And as I suggest to you, your deep sleep, your delta sleep begins to disappear in your mid to late 50s, and you're going to start uh, reporting sleep problems. And in fact, they say half of all adults, 50% and older, will report sleep problems. Go ask your parents and if they have trouble sleeping at night or if there are any problems that they have. Most of them are going to report that they have trouble staying awake at night, that they wake up lots of times. Some of them are going to report that they get up before they want in the morning. And some of them may even report that they have trouble going to sleep at night. And this is all a function of losing that delta sleep late in the night. Now, sleep disturbances are a common feature in many psych disorders. 12 to 20% of adults are going to suffer from insomnia. This is the difficulty getting to sleep at night or remaining asleep at night. Typically, it can be associated with depression, and a lot of times, the more you worry about your sleep, the harder it is to get to sleep. Cognitive behavioral therapy. So, going and talking to a therapist about this and working on your habits of sleep are going to really help you treat your difficulty with sleeping or your insomnia. Now, insomnia. Some people do take drugs to go to sleep at night. However, these drugs that help people go to sleep at night are very, very addictive. And I would suggest to you, rather than using some of these sleep drugs, you really work on developing better sleep habits. Now, sleep apnea. You'll see the person below me there wearing a mask. Sleep apnea is a disorder that happens when your brain, when you don't get enough oxygen. You have a blockage in your throat, which prevents you from getting enough oxygen. Now, deep in your medulla, which is responsible for breathing and heart rate, you have an oxygen sensor that measures the amount of oxygen in your blood, and it keeps you from stopping breathing, and it keeps you from sleeping if you're not getting enough oxygen. So let's say you rolled over and suddenly you couldn't breathe anymore and your oxygen level started dropping. If you didn't wake up, you would suffocate and die during the middle of the night. And so this part of your brain is responsible for making you wake up when your oxygen levels get low. Now, people with sleep apnea, for some reason or another, have a blockage in their throat, which prevents them from getting the air that they need. And you'll hear people with these blockages because sometimes they snore really loud or make really loud, obnoxious noises while they're sleeping at night. And this is the blockage in their throat that's preventing the smooth airflow in and out of their throat. And what happens is these people wake up sometimes hundreds of times a night without even knowing it. And so they wake up during the day and they're really, really tired and they don't feel good and they don't know exactly why because they think they slept all night long. Really, what happened was they never got to sleep really good and they're not getting enough REM sleep at night. And that's why they don't feel good. Now, a lot of times, extra weight is going to lead to these feeling of sleep apnea. And so losing weight or using a CPAP machine, which pushes air down into your throat, is going to help solve this apnea problem. Okay, now quickly, narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is what happens when people, most of us cycle back and forth normally between the different stages of sleep. Narcoleptics don't do that, and they don't get into REM sleep at night. So what happens is narcoleptics will actually fall into REM sleep in the middle of the day. And remember, when you're in REM sleep, your body is paralyzed. So what you're going to see is somebody's walking around during the day and they'll fall asleep, and a lot of times they'll fall over on the ground because their body becomes paralyzed and they can't stand up. All right. Narcoleptics, and this falling on the ground is sometimes called cataplexy, the loss of muscle tone. If you're interested in seeing narcolepsy and cataplexy, I've got a crazy video in the course resources folder about somebody with narcolepsy. And so these people's brain cycle at night doesn't go like it's supposed to be. And so they fall into REM sleep in the middle of the day, and a lot of times just fall right over on the ground and hurt themselves because their body becomes paralyzed. Right? Now, some people do thrash and kick about during their REM dreams, and that's because their pons isn't working very well, and they suffer what's known as REM behavior disorder. And so their pons doesn't paralyze their body while they're sleeping. And so they'll thrash about during their dreams, and sometimes they'll hurt themselves or their sleep partner. And there's medicine for helping people who suffer from REM behavioral disorder. And finally, sleepwalking and sleep talking. This is way common in early childhood kids. They're going to sleepwalk and sleep talk. Here's the crazy thing about sleepwalking and sleep talking. It does not occur while we're dreaming. We don't walk and talk because we're dreaming. Actually, sleepwalking and sleep talking comes during delta sleep. All right, I'm going to ask you about that on the exam. It's a trick question. A lot of people think that we sleepwalk because we're dreaming about something. Absolutely not. Sleepwalking and sleep talking typically comes during delta sleep, and it's fairly common in early childhood. Less common as adults, but if your child ever does it, don't worry, there's nothing abnormal with your kid. They're just doing this occasionally. Okay? Now, that's all I have to say. Gosh, we are at 9:55. I've spent more time talking than I wanted to. Sorry, I went over lecture for 5 minutes. Don't forget, it's Thursday. If you didn't come to the webinar last night, you need to do the discussion board by 11:59 p.m. tonight in order to get credit for this week's collaboration. If you did do the webinar and want extra credit, please do the collaborate. You are more than welcome to do the collaboration. And the review session for for this weekend's midterm exam will be tomorrow morning at 8:30 on YouTube. Okay? Take care and have a great day. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow in webinar. Take care.